Hello, and welcome to my channel. This channel will be about me reading Reddit stories I find interesting in an attempt to help you relax and focus on whatever you're doing. I started this channel because I was tired of AI voiceovers and wanted to bring you something real, human, and personal. So if the audio isn't always the best at times, forgive me since I'm still learning, and make sure to leave down a comment what I could fix. Without further ado, get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's begin. If you'd like more moments like these, feel free to subscribe and stay for the stories. Here is the first story. I, 24 male, have an identical twin. We're not close, but I thought we had basic mutual respect. That belief was tested. I grew up in a traditional southern town and only began coming out in college, about 5 years ago. It's been slow, especially with family, but since moving to DC in 23 for schoolwork, I felt more comfortable living authentically. After moving, I met my boyfriend, 26 male, and we've been together 2 years. Over time, I've introduced him to friends and family when I felt safe. Cuts to November 24, I was home for the holidays and told my twin and his fiance about my boyfriend. They seemed happy for me. While staying with them, wedding details arose and they asked if I'd be bringing a date. I said yes, my boyfriend. My twin had gone to bed, but his fiance said, "Well, there are pros and cons. It's up to you if you want to bring him." That felt like a green light. My twin constantly deferred to her on decisions, so I didn't think I needed to double check. 5 months passed. My boyfriend and I had spent $1,300 on travel, flights, hotel, etc. 3 weeks before the wedding, I mentioned on a call with my brother that we were all set. His tone shifted. Oh, is boyfriend actually coming? I reminded him of the conversation of his fiance. He said she never gave me permission and accused me of making it up. Then said, "We can't allow your boyfriend to come. We worry how dad's side will react." I offered to call dad on the spot. He dodged, saying he checked with his fiance despite just saying it was his decision. An hour later, no change. I was still invited alone, still expected to buy a groomsman match suiting, even though I wasn't in the party, and show up smiling. That's when I snapped. I asked if I didn't invite your fiance to my wedding, would you still come? He couldn't answer and ended the call after some harsh words. Trying to make things right, I came out to my dad, which I feared for years, to explain the situation. He was surprisingly indifferent, even said uninviting my boyfriend was extreme. He offered to talk to extended family. I thought I was removing the main obstacle. Weeks later, my twin called again. He now claimed our friends would be weirded out, so the excuse shifted. I said, "If my boyfriend's not invited, I'm not coming." He didn't budge. Here's the kicker. Days later, my dad told me the fiance admitted she did give me permission, but changed her mind when she remembered who would be there. She denied this to my twin. Also, one of her bridesmaids is openly gay and brought her girlfriend, but according to the fiance, she's not part of the family, so it's different. So I didn't go. I'm still wondering if I made the wrong call. My absence was noted. I got texts asking where I was. My mom had to explain it repeatedly, so instead of avoiding attention, my absence became the story. My relationship with my twin is dead, and some family ties now feel fragile. Part of me wonders, should I have sucked it up and gone solo just to preserve bonds that shaped my early life? So am I the asshole for skipping the wedding? In my opinion, I don't think that person is the asshole. But if you guys feel otherwise, just let me know down in the comments what you all feel. Now for the second story. This one I thought was pretty funny. It starts like this. This actually happened today. I love spicy food. My tolerance doesn't reach any dizzying heights, but I can usually get through very spicy meals relatively comfortably. I'd always wanted to challenge myself to eat a ghost pepper or even a reaper to see how I'd handle it. There's an incredible independent chicken wing place near me that does various spice challenges, the hottest of which is called Nil by Mouth. They don't advertise the Scovilles on this, but this particular wing requires you to sign a waiver before you attempt it. Few people had completed it without the added milk or even ice cream. I've been to this restaurant a half dozen times, and I've always said I'd try it someday. How bad could it be? Well, today was that day. My partner, who also has a respectable spice tolerance, and I were going to try it together to make it a little fun contest to see who could last the longest. We eat our main meals, delicious South Carolina barbecue, and maple habanero wings with Asian slaw. Awesome. Maple habanero is on the menu as very hot. We questioned the heat. We questioned their heat classifications because they were very easy. We're not convinced they're not overselling the heat on these death wings. It'll be fine, we deduce. Out comes the Nile by mouth along with a set of gloves. The wings are drenched in thick, bright crimson sauce. It smells like pure spice and nothing else, but oddly appetizing and makes my mouth water. Waivers are signed to say it's my fault if I get ill because I was stupid enough to try this. Still blissfully unaware of how bad this could be until a chef emerges from the kitchen, stands across from our table, crosses his arms, and grins. Just to say before you try this, if someone's already in the bathroom and you start to feel ill, we keep a bucket just inside the door that says staff only, says the waitress. Is it really that bad? My partner asks. It has been, she laughs. Oh, okay. We don the gloves. The couples on the tables next to us are watching now. A premonition of, oh God, what have I done, fleets my mind. I start to question if this is a good idea, but the hell wings are looking at me like the Green Goblin mask. Oh well, YOLO, in it. We count down from three and bite. First of all, it tasted disgusting, like a weird earthy bitter taste. The sauce is definitely based on an extract rather than trying to actually be palatable. Red flag was waving, but it was too late. However, the spice doesn't start out too bad. We're just roasting the dog shit flavor at this point. Yeah, it's awful, isn't it? Laughs the chef. What the fuck, bro? You made it. Probably not actually. I don't know. We finished the wings. The spice is building now. All of a sudden, it takes off. My mouth ignites. My lips ignite. My throat ignites. I think something has literally lit a fire on my tongue. I don't know what to do with myself. I'm gasping for cool air, but every breath makes it worse. My ears start to ring. I'm flapping my hands, trying to cool my lips down. It feels like Satan himself has just opened a guided tour of hell, and the entrance is in my mouth. My partner starts to choke. He stands up, leans over the table, tries to breathe in between unrelenting hiccups. Meanwhile, I seem to have lost control of my limbs, scrambling around the bench with my feet, tears streaming down my face. My body seems to have developed pores inside my pores in a feeble attempt to sweat this shit out. The pain is unlike anything I've ever felt to this point. My mouth is excruciating, and my whole body doesn't know how to cope with it. This is certainly a keen response to going into shock, and it's just getting worse. Before we can plead for help, our Lord and Savior, the chef, has already been and brought ice creams to the table. It's on the house, he says. I think my man felt a tinge of guilt for all the enjoyment he was getting out of this. I go through three mini milkies and a chocolate milk before I start to feel relief. I totally forget my partner was even there. When I look at him, he's as red as the sauce himself. His pupils are so dilated I can barely see his irises. Usually a man of many words, he looks at me with tormented eyes. That was no joke, is all he says. I asked the chef how many Scovilles that was. 7 million, we're told. Holy shit. I knew that a Reaper was around 2 million. I thought the sauce couldn't be much more worse than that. What a numpty. Anyway, after 20 minutes or so, we recover, we go home, we're all good, right? But then it gets worse. And actually, I'm pretty sure this isn't the end of it. We're lying on the sofa watching Off the Hook. My stomach starts to hurt. I drink some milk. It helps a bit. My partner's all good. I'm sure it'll pass. I lie back down as it seems to be the most comfortable position right now. Remember when I said the pain was unlike anything I've ever felt until this point? Yeah, well, it turns out I'd find out far sooner than I ever thought was a pain worse than that felt like. Suddenly, an excruciating, searing pain rips through my stomach. The embers have lighted again, but this time someone's doused my digestive tract with gasoline for good measure. The Deathwing has base grin lit for a sequel, and this time it's bringing double the budget. I'm writhing in pain. My body feels like it's on fire again. I move to the bed to lay down. It's no good. No position helps. I move to the bathroom. I lay in the fetal position on the floor inside the shower, wet from the shower earlier to try and cool down. It doesn't work. I'm screaming internally, hyperventilating, head light and wavering. I can see the light of heaven. I can see the light of heaven and St. Peter's pearly gates calling my name. I'm actually hoping I do pass out so I don't have to feel the pain anymore. My partner is freaking out. I can't speak to answer his questions. I am shaking uncontrollably from the agony I am in. The pins and needles in my hands are so bad that I can't even move my fingers. I start throwing up on the floor. I manage to tell my partner to turn the shower on. He does. I continue to throw up. The shower floor now swirling with my vomit, fully closed and now freezing cold. My partner wants to call an ambulance, but I know the only way is to ride this out. Thankfully, it seems the vomiting managed to get enough of this demon spawn out of my system. Gradually, I started to recover. I took a full shower, drank a ton of milk and water, ate some bread, and now I sit here typing this tale of the accursed chicken wing that made this atheist see Jesus. And this may only be the beginning, you know what I mean? TLDR, choose a fate worse than death when I decided to eat 7 million Scoville chicken wing. Don't do it, kids, or do. I am not your dad. Jesus Christ, that seemed like a hell of an experience. I am not super good with spicy food myself, so I would probably be having a very similar reaction. I don't think anything will beat that second story. That was something in itself. But here's a third story for you guys. I get a break here because it happened when I was 13 years old. I was a young wannabe photographer and I had been researching the cost of setting up my own darkroom. It's a mostly lost art. You need an enlarger. They ran from very simple optical lamps for under $100 to super sophisticated models that ran over $1,000 film tanks, chemicals, paper, and dozens of other pieces of equipment. Plus, you needed a light-proof room with decent ventilation. My parents were mostly supportive, if not mostly disinterested. I was allowed to come and go as I please, and they were willing to let me use an unused bathroom at our house to set up my erstwhile darkroom. I just never had enough money to do it, so I used to have to use a rented darkroom at a local studio that charged by the hour. My 15-year-old brother was a very early computer nerd and phone freak. Early hackers used a Captain Crunch whistle to get free calls, but that's a whole different story. He had different projects going on all the time, some pretty sketchy. He used to buy stuff from the US government. They mailed books for auctions and surplus disposal. He had set up a bidding account and bought crazy used electronics and decommissioned communication devices. It was all through a sealed bid offer and conducted solely through snail mail. You'd see a listing you wanted, you filled out a bidding form and then sent it through the mail. If you were the high bid, you receive a notice sometimes 4 to 6 weeks later with instructions on payment and drayage. He showed me a brief listing that caught his eye. It's been 15 years, but it was something like portable field darkroom in larger trays, storage self contained with supplies and tools. The listing had dozens of abbreviations and other details that I didn't understand, and it was located 90 miles away in the San Diego area. Shipping was to be coordinating by winning bidder. I was very excited. My brother had gotten electronics and tools for pennies on the dollar. He agreed to send a bid for me. After much deliberation on how much to bid, we came upon the magnificent sum of $80,000. There was little to no chance that I would win, but who knew? We set off the bid. When the end date came and went, I breathlessly checked the mail daily to see if we won. Finally, I received a very official looking envelope with basically a notification and an invoice. I won. We paid through a postal money order and received instructions on where to collect my triumphant spoils. This is where things go sideways. We just had no way of getting this stuff picked up. It was miles away. I didn't even have a bicycle at the time. Thanks, Bobby Dixon. My brother worked out a deal with a super shady guy named Lance who had a mini truck for a tank of gas and some swipe booze. My parents were super light drinkers by the time I moved out. The bottles behind their bar were 90% water. We were mobile. We drove down to the warehouse with my paperwork in hand. Turns out we were going to a Marine base. There we were. My brother, a slightly chubby, freckled redhead, me, a scrawny, prepubescent doofus, and Lance, a long-haired stoner straight out of Dazed and Confused. 15 years ahead of time, but period correct he was, wearing a Mr. Zog sex wax t-shirt. As we got closer to the gate, Lance starts freaking out. He's got pot on him and no ID. After explaining who we were and why we were there, the gate guard had us drive to a holding area. Do not exit the vehicle. Do not drive past the second fence. After about 25 minutes, a very stern looking guy came out and walked around the trunk. Gentlemen, I understand you're here to retrieve a parcel. Yes, sir. Do not address me as sir. I work for a living. I may have made this up. I'm Gunnery Sergeant Jones. Is this vehicle the vehicle in which you intend to remove your property? Yes, Gunnery Sergeant. Well, who is Orma Flint? Well, me, sir. I mean Gunnery Sergeant. He said to follow him. He took us to a dusty field and a storage yard where we passed building after building of neglected green junk. Everything was covered in tarps and tied with rope. He finally stopped and said, "Do you see the problem here?" Huh, what? This is your dark room. We were in front of a dated 20-inch trailer from no later than 1960. It was filthy and sitting on very low tires. He opened the door. Go ahead, watch out for mice and spiders. Inside was as shitty as a rotted exterior. Boxes of old photographic supplies, unrecognizable canisters, and an ancient vintage enlarger that was probably state of the art when Ike was in the White House. I was crestfallen, feeling dumb. Gunny chimed in. I don't think Chet's rig will tow this thing. Tow this thing? I wanted us to get out of here and never look back. What happens if we don't pick it up, kid? Unless you're hiding a diesel rig somewhere in that thing. That thing is going nowhere. We left. The coup de grace. My brother and I left. As much as I wanted to split the blame with him, he was older. This was on me. I told him it was great. It was a great deal and that I knew everything on the listing. My money was gone. Thanks, Gerald Ford, but the worst was yet to come. Sometime in the next few weeks, we started getting official looking abandoned property letters and notices of forfeiture. And then it happened. I came home from school one afternoon, and there in front of my house was the green beast. My horror was compounded by the fact that it was blocking my driveway. There was no hiding from this. I went inside the house. I remember closing the drips as if my parents wouldn't notice it when they came home, and started frantically calling the numbers I had for the warehouse. It was about 3 or 4 tries in when I finally got someone on the line who could help. Yeah, we had a load going to Oxnard and Gunny, so to drop it off on the way. I said, "Are you crazy? I'm a 13-year-old kid." The other guy on the end said, "Well, according to the Department of Disposal, you're the owner of a surplus trailer," and hung up. About this time, a small group of nosy ass neighbors and kids, most of my friends, had gathered around to see the green behemoth. This was perfect timing as my dad was rounding the corner in his brown 1972 Fleetwood Brougham, which was a tank in its own right. My parents were not exactly engaged helicopter parents. My siblings and I pretty much did whatever we wanted with little or no supervision. They only got involved when our antics disrupted their lives, like now. My dad was not Ward Cleaver. He basically said deal with it. Over the next few days, I cleaned it out and was able to move it so it wasn't blocking the driveway. 8 kids pushing it. After a few days, we decided to run an ad in LA Recycler. If you know, you know. I sold it to a hippie who showed up in a vintage postal truck and gave me $50. I eventually built my darkroom, and my family still teases me about the beast. TLDR, 13-year-old me bid on a portable darkroom and won a decommissioned military trailer. That was one hell of a story that you don't hear every day. Now, for this fourth story, it goes a little like this. I was doing yard work and had a huge burn pile after it. I usually use diesel as an accelerant for my brush piles, but I was out of diesel and figured if I was careful, it would be fine to just use regular gasoline. I poured about 1/4 gasoline on there and grabbed a little drab torch. Here's when things went awry. I got a small bit set on fire and turned around to move away. That's when the boom happened. I was basically engulfed in flame. My legs got the worst of it, but my entire right side is burned all the way to my head. I stopped, dropped, and rolled. Skin was falling off my calf muscles as I stood up. Ambulance took me to the helipad and took me to a medical city piano burn unit. I have these special things stapled into my legs now, and we are about to do 6 skin grafts. TLDR, I set myself on fire and my legs are fucked now. Okay, here we go for the fifth story. So this happened a few months ago, but it's still kind of messing with me, lol. My 8-year-old cousin was over for a family thing, and he's a pretty quiet kid. He gets overwhelmed around adults and mostly just sits in the corner with his Switch. I thought maybe I could help him feel more included, so I offered to play some Mario Kart with him. He lit up right away, told me he loved racing games, but he never gets to win when he plays with his older brother. So I figured, yeah, sure, why not? I'll let him have a couple wins, help him feel like a champ. I started sandbagging a bit, not drifting much, slowing down at the end so he could pass me. The usual big cousin move, you know? He wins 3 races in a row and he's bouncing around like he just won the lottery, yelling, "I'm actually good at this." And my aunt is clapping and smiling like he just graduated college or something. Wholesome moment, 10 out of 10. But then he wants to keep playing like a lot. I keep letting him win because I'm thinking, all right, this will burn out eventually. Spoiler, it didn't. Fast forward to now, this kid brings a Switch over every time he visits. He walks in the door like, "You ready to lose again?" And I laugh, but inside I know it's not a joke anymore. He grinded, he actually practiced, he knows all the shortcuts, hits every drift, uses mushrooms like some kind of kart racing warlock. I started trying again and he still beats me like regularly. It's not even close sometimes. And the worst part, he talks trash like straight up, "Maybe you should pick baby mode." And did you mean to fall off Rainbow Road? Or his dad, my uncle, told me he plays every day now and tells his school friends I beat a grown up at Mario Kart and made him quit, which technically happened once when I rage quit after getting blue shell twice in one race. I'm not proud. Anyway, yeah, I was just trying to be nice, and now I have a pint sized rival who's slowly destroying my gaming self esteem one race at a time. At least he says I'm his favorite cousin now because he before he obliterates me on Wario Stadium. TLDR tried to let my little cousin win at Mario Kart to boost his confidence. I accidentally created a mini tryhard who now absolutely wrecks me every time he visits. Now for the sixth story. I'm staying out of town, and the place I'm staying in hasn't got the greatest sound insulation, and there is someone else directly through the wall. I can hear them watching TV. I could even hear them using an app I use because I recognize the notification sounds. Today I've had in a little bit of an upset stomach from eating food I'm not used to, which well makes me a bit gassy. I've been trying to sneak out quiet toots, blow offs, passing wind, letting one rip. You get it, because I was pretty sure my neighbor would hear any loud noises. I felt a good one brewing and tried to let it out without trumpeting its presence. Unfortunately, I failed. It was so loud and long, it would have made a pattern on one of those cymatic sound resonance plates. There was a short pause, and then coming from the other side of the wall, I heard what sounded like a very intentional long toot with a wee extra toot at the end. I'm dying. I fucked up, embarrassing myself by tooting so loudly my neighbor definitely heard. What am I going to do when I eventually get to meet them? I didn't expect a sympathy toot, or maybe it was a challenge. Should I do one back? TLDR, I noticed my upset tummy to my Airbnb host by tooting so loud they heard me through the wall, but at least they did toot back. And now for the seventh story. This was a few months ago. It was my day off, and the only thing I had to do was pick my girlfriend up from work at 9 p.m. Other than that, I was free to loaf on the couch from morning to night, which is what I did. Around 8 o'clock, I decided to shower before I left the house. Now, I have short hair that dries pretty quickly, but I am deeply vain about it, so I always dry it with the hair dryer right after I shower to ensure my hair doesn't get flat and weird. I never skip this step, so I get out of the shower, I start drying my hair, and then I wake up in bed. It's in half an hour later. I feel like garbage. My entire body mysteriously hurts, and I am slowly realizing that I don't remember exiting the bathroom. My only clear thought is, "Oh shit! It's 9 o'clock. I have to pick up my girlfriend." Better shake myself awake. I dragged my aching carcass back to the bathroom, and this is when I noticed the massive blisters forming all over my hand. I was still pretty out of it, but I knew this was a hospital visit kind of burn. My girlfriend then called to check in because I was running late, and despite my undoubtedly convincing argument that I was still perfectly fine to drive, she immediately knew something was wrong. She cabbed home, and we got a ride to the ER. Turns out I had my first ever seizure. It seems like during the seizure, I clenched the hairdryer in my fist and had it pointed at my other hand long enough to thoroughly cook it. The tissue loss is pretty deep in some areas, and there were concerns about me retaining my mobility, but it's been healing well so far. If I had showered at any other time, I probably would have been reclining on a soft surface when I seized it. Instead, it had to happen while doing the only possibly risky activity I could muster up the energy for that day, aside from picking my girlfriend up. Thank Christ I wasn't driving. In the end, we spent 10 hours in the ER between all the scars and tests. I was bedridden for almost a month. My license was suspended, and I have some gnarly scars for the rest of my life. TLDR, spent the whole day in the safest possible position of a seizure. Had a seizure during the 5 minutes it takes to dry my hair, resulting in severe burns. Okay, here goes the eighth story. Everything I'm about to write is true. For months, several people have told me I absolutely had to write this story down, so today I finally decided to do it. Technically, this isn't a today I fucked up, it's more of a last October I fucked up, but I hope you'll forgive me. This might not be the perfect subreddit, but honestly, I had no idea where else to post a story this long and bizarre. I'll try to be as precise as possible with the context. Let's begin. After dreaming of visiting Japan for years, last year I finally bought the tickets, booked a vacation months in advance, and started planning this trip for of a lifetime. I arrived in Milan the night before our departure, October the 16th, to celebrate. I took two of my three friends, the third was at a concert, to a Michelin starred Japanese restaurant. The idea was to see how the best Japanese food back home compared to the real deal. After dinner, we returned to an incredibly noisy B&B and barely slept a wink. The next morning, running on fumes, we got to the airport 4 hours early and calmly boarded flight CA 950 from Milan to Beijing. The flight was uneventful. The layover in Beijing, however, was not. The atmosphere it was incredibly tense. A Chinese security officer started screaming at me because he thought I had something suspicious in my pocket. It was a candy wrapper. After clearing security, we finally made it to our gate and boarded the next flight, CA925, to Tokyo. That flight was also smooth, and finally, after about 18 hours of travel, we landed at Narita Airport around 1:40 p.m. local time on October the 18th. We made our way to our hotel in Shibuya to drop off our bags and take a shower. I was completely wiped out from the long journey and the lack of sleep. I suggested we meet up for dinner later to get a few hours of rest, but my friends protested. No, we're in Japan. Let's go for a walk right now. Fine. Apparently, I'm an old man on the inside. I agreed, and an hour later, I found myself wandering through Shibuya with nearly 36 hours of sleep, debt weighing me down. We met up with a friend who had moved to Japan years ago. She acted as our guide, showing us around the area. We had dinner at a local spot where, as she put it, gaijin didn't usually go, and everything was absolutely incredible. After dinner, we decided to grab a drink. Our friend took us to a bar tucked away on a Shibuya side street packed with locals drinking and dancing. I had a couple of gin and tonics, which were mostly ice, and I danced enough that I felt pretty sober, but I was still seriously messed up from the exhaustion. At one point, I managed to de escalate a fight between two huge Russian guys who were about to come to blows, and I even ended up making friends with them. I'm a 100 kilogram powerlifter, so I'm not a small guy. This detail will be relevant later. We left the bar and since it was late around 1:30 a.m., our friend decided to take a taxi home. Our hotel was relatively close, so we planned to walk. As she was saying goodbye, I glanced up at the building across the street and saw a strange, ghostly figure staring at me from one of the upper floors. To this day, I'm not sure what it was. I assume it was just a creepy mannequin, but it was unsettling. I have photos if you want to see it. I turned to look at the street and saw a taxi stopped at the intersection on the other side. Our friend had mentioned that finding a taxi in that area at that hour was tough, so we decided to make a dash for it. The street was deserted, the pedestrian light was still red, but it was on its last silver. The traffic light for cars was already red. We looked left and right. In true Beatles fashion, started crossing the street. My friend, who was right behind me, heard a strange noise. Neither I nor my other friend saw anything, but he screamed, "Watch out!" Not knowing what was happening, I tried to sprint forward. I was only about half a meter from the other side. I never made it. The world started spinning. In my head, I saw the city lights rotating as if I were inside a washing machine. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the ground. I had no idea what had happened, but I pushed myself up into a sitting position with my left arm. I felt no pain, no discomfort, just confusion. I saw pieces of a motorcycle's bodywork scattered around me. My friend rushed over to check on me as I tried to make a sense of it all. I realized that when I tried to move my left leg, only the top part of my femur moved. The rest of my leg stayed put. Broken leg, yep. I started to feel a dull ache in the arm I was using to prop myself up. Something was probably broken there, too. I switched to my other arm and looked at my left side. I didn't see anything unusual, but I felt a sharp pain around my collarbone. Broken clavicle, yup, my hand was also bleeding heavily from a deep gash between my middle and ring fingers, likely from where I hit the motorcycle. That's right, I'd been hit by a black motorcycle that, according to my friend and other bystanders, was traveling at around 70 kilometers an hour, 45 miles per hour at night with its headlights off, or at least no one saw them, and they were off when the bike was on the ground. It's still unclear. I immediately asked how the rider was. At first, no one answered. A minute later, they told me he had been knocked unconscious by the impact, but had come to almost immediately and was okay. His bike, an 800cc Yamaha, was destroyed. A passerby called an ambulance, which arrived within minutes. The paramedics loaded me in. Thankfully, they understood some English, but my friend was able to translate in Japanese anyway what had happened and explain my condition. A police officer arrived shortly after, got into the ambulance, and asked me what had happened. He asked if I had been drinking. I answered honestly, one beer, two gin and tonics. The officer stepped away and made a call. My friend overheard him tell the dispatch a drunk gaijin caused an accident. He has insurance, he'll sort it out. My friends had to hold her back from screaming at him. No official report was filed. No statement was taken. When I got to the hospital, I realized the local police had simply made the problem disappear. The foreigner would deal with his insurance, and the local rider would deal with his bike. At Shibuya Hospital, I was admitted to the emergency room. They ran full CT scans to assess the damage and stitched on my hand. The diagnosis a compound fracture of the femur and a compound fracture of the clavicle. By now, it was the morning of October 19th. I spent two of my friends to continue their vacation while one stayed behind to help me, crashing at our local friend's place. The hospital scheduled my femur surgery for 2 days later on Monday night the 21st, and the clavicle surgery for the following week. The nurses were incredibly sweet and tried to communicate with me using some kind of Asian translation app, not Google Translate. This one had K-pop in the middle of the screen and translated everything horribly. One time a nurse said something and the app cut her off, translating it as Kelly is drunk, which sent my friend and me into a fit of laughter. Another hilarious quirk was that the Japanese often omit the subject of a sentence, so the app always defaulted to I phrases like I have to take your pants off because I have to take my pants off, which I admit made me smile. I didn't realize it was that kind of hospital. If you know, you know. Monday arrived, and at 1 p.m., they wheeled me into the operating room. 9 hours of surgery, 4 bags of blood, a 38 centimeter titanium rod, 6 screws, and a metal clamp to put my femur back together. I came out of it at 10 p.m., completely zonked out from the anesthesia, but by the next day, I was feeling generally okay. My foot, however, was paralyzed post op, apparently. A nerve was being compressed by swelling. Thankfully, it started to move again a couple of days later, which was a huge relief. The week after, the day before my clavicle surgery, they took me to the shower room to get washed. I could barely sit in a wheelchair and my foot was screaming in pain. Strangely, my leg didn't hurt much, but the shooting pains in my foot felt like a fiery needle. The nurse gestured for me to sit down on a tiny stool that was possibly the width of one of my thighs. I was barely perched on it. The room was just a hard floor with a bathtub in the middle. The nurse then motioned that she was going to remove the IV from my left arm. I pointed out that I had surgery the next day, but she insisted. She yanked it out. She just pulled it straight out without applying any pressure or even putting a cotton ball over it. Blood went everywhere. She panicked and just froze, holding the needle, murmuring, "Oh, oh," as a red pool formed on the floor. I looked at her, saw she was still holding the spongy elastic netting that had kept the IV in place, took it from her hand and pressed down hard on the wound to stop the bleeding myself. It worked. She looked at me and said, "Oh, okay, okay." I just stared back, saying nothing. To make matters worse, while moving me from the bed to the wheelchair earlier, one of the two pieces of my broken clavicle had popped out of place and was now visibly protruding, completely locking my left arm. The nurse proceeded to grab the shower head, rinse me, and apply soap to my arms and legs and shampoo to my hand. Then she looked at me and said, "Okay." I motioned for the soap, and with my good arm, I washed the rest of my body. When the shower was over, the nurse gestured for me to stand up and move up to the wheelchair. I looked at the floor. It was stone soaking wet and covered in soap. I had one functioning arm and one functioning leg. I weigh 100 kilograms, 220 pounds, and this Japanese nurse couldn't have weighed more than 40 kilograms, 90 pounds, soaking wet. The stool was so low that it was past a deep squat position. I had zero leverage. I motioned to her that to get me up, she needed to at least get 3 or 4 more nurses. She grumbled, left, and came back with 4 more. The oldest nurse noticed a heavy mobile metal platform at the end of the room. It had a handle at chest height. She would it over, locked it in place to give me something to pull myself up with. With the help of 4 nurses, I started to stand. I was almost upright when I began to slip. My left leg, the one with the brand new titanium rod, slid out and slammed against the side of the bathtub as all 5 nurses now scrambled to keep me from falling. I looked at the nurse who had now wanted me to get up by myself. I said nothing. She said nothing. We each understood each other perfectly. The days passed. The operation on my clavicle, a 2-hour procedure, and life settled into a routine. The doctors wanted me to stay for 45 days before flying, but I insisted on going home and pushed myself as hard as I could in every physical therapy session. Finally, a surgeon who operated on me, one of the few people in the hospital who spoke excellent English, announced that I could fly home the following week. I'd proven I could sit comfortably in a wheelchair and handle the return flight. I immediately looked for the first available flight, November the 2nd, but then I had a hunch. I checked the weather forecast. A typhoon was coming. Typhoon Kongre was set to pass directly over Tokyo on November the 2nd. I decided to wait until November the 4th. Risking a flight home during a typhoon seemed like a bad idea. Instead, I got to enjoy the storm from my 10th floor hospital window. Finally, November 4th arrived. I was discharged at 2 p.m. outside the hospital. My friend met me with fresh sushi and a bottle of sake as a parting gift. The sushi was spectacular. At least I got to try some before leaving. A few hours later, we boarded flight TK199 from Hanada to Istanbul, scheduled for 9:45 p.m. I was in business class since I decided I needed to keep my legs straight. The plane took off, making a lot of noise, but it seemed normal. About 10 minutes later after takeoff, I saw the pilot rush out of the cockpit and run towards the economy section. I started to worry. A few hours passed with no news. I even managed to fall asleep at some point. I woke up and glanced at the flight map on the screen. The plane was heading back to Tokyo. I asked for an explanation, but the crew said nothing. Half an hour later, the pilot announced that were technical problems and they didn't feel safe crossing the ocean with the engines in that condition. We would land back in Haneda, and if everything was okay, we'd take off again. Otherwise, the flight would be canceled. We landed. A long time passed. Then the announcement came: the engines were not in good condition. The flight was canceled. We deplaned and went back to the airline ticket counter. They told us they would refund the tickets and we could book a flight with another airplane. The refund, they said, would arrive within 2 weeks. We were talking about an €8,500 ticket. I dug in my heels and demanded they provide a hotel and a new flight home. This was their problem, not mine. After a 2 hour standoff, they finally found a solution: a new flight, TK5I, from Narita to Istanbul, departing November 6th at 10:15 a.m., followed by TK1867 to Venice. They booked us a room at the Hilton Narita and the airport hotel in Istanbul. I finally got some real sleep at the Hilton. We took the new flight and landed in Istanbul, where during the approach the wind was so strong that the plane had to line up with the runway at a sharp angle. As a result, the landing was very rough. The impact sent bottles and other unsecured objects flying forward. Aside from a good scare, luckily we were all in one piece. Strangely, at the Turkish airport, no one spoke English. I pulled out my phone to use a translator and realized the airport's free Wi Fi was limited to 30 minutes, which I had already used on the plane to text my parents. Airport staff wheeled me around without me having any idea where we were going. Then I remembered I had a company eSIM on my phone. I managed to get another 30 minutes of free internet, downloaded the Turkish language pack for Google Translate, and was finally able to talk to my escort. We were going to the hotel. After some complication at check-in, no one had realized I was in a wheelchair. They gave me a double disabled access, fully automated smart room on the first floor. It was very comfortable. The bathroom had a shower with a support bars and a chair anchored to the wall. Finally, I could take a real shower. I maneuvered myself onto the shower chair and turned on the hot water, planning to spend an hour just relaxing and washing the hospital smell off of me. Half an hour went by. I was soapy, relaxed, and everything was fine. And then the entire room went pitch black. The hotel's smart home system, it turned out, had convenient motion sensors. If no motion was detected for 30 minutes, it would turn off the lights to save energy. But there was no sensor in the bathroom. I sat there in the dark, naked, soapy, and with one working arm and leg under the hot water for like 5 long minutes. What were my options? Ring the emergency bell and have a random Turkish employee find me naked in the shower, slowly lower myself to the floor and crawl to the door. Then, as I scratched my head, my left arm, I remembered I was wearing my smartwatch. I turned it on. The screen cast a faint glow. I used it to pull back the shower curtain, find my phone on the sink, and use its flashlight to get back into my wheelchair, roll to the entrance, and flip the main light switch back on. I finished my shower in 5 minutes and collapsed into bed. The next day, we finally took the flight home, TK1867, and I made it back to Italy. I survived, and now I have one hell of a story to tell. Everything I've written is true, and I hope I've attached all the data that I can prove it. I used Gemini to translate this text as I didn't feel like writing it all in English. But I reviewed it and there are no major mistakes. However, if you find any strange AI only special characters, you'll know why. If you want to see some pictures, just ask. I see that I cannot attach some here, but maybe I'm doing something wrong. TLDR, after 36 hours of no sleep, I jaywalked in Shibuya and got hit by a motorcycle going 70 kilometers an hour. With no lights on, I broke my femur and clavicle, endured a hospital stay full of comical errors, narrowly avoided a typhoon, survived a flight with engine failure, and nearly got trapped naked and disabled in a pitch black smart hotel bathroom in Istanbul. But hey, I got to try some great sushi. That was one long story. That was all the stories we had for today. If you liked the comment, make sure to always subscribe and like. If there was anything I could have done different, let me know down in the comments. And I hope you guys have a good rest of your day.